had a hammer. The hammer was called Mjolnir. The hammer was magical. And with it, he could throw it, just like in the films, and it would fly off and come back to his hand. And come back to his hand. It would always hit his target every time whenever he threw it. And he used it to slay giants, and with it, he could keep the whole of Asgard safe. Asgard was the realm of the gods, a bit like a Viking heaven, but not all sort of, just where the gods lived. And to get there, you had to go across a rainbow bridge from Midgard, the land where we live, the mortals live, up into the sky into Asgard. Thor's hammer kept Asgard safe. It defended him and the other gods from monsters and from giants, and especially from armies of giants who might march against the gods. So one day, one morning, when Thor woke up and sleepily, groggily reaching down by the side of his bed for Mjolnir, and he couldn't find it, he was worried. He was very worried. He always kept it close in case he needed to do battle, and because he liked keeping it close. It was a fantastic magical item. So he got up and he searched around his room. He couldn't find Mjolnir anywhere. He picked up his bed. He's Thor. He's a thunder god. He's super strong. He picked up his bed and looked under it, but it wasn't there either. He went all around his house, his hall, as the Vikings used to call it. He went from room to room and picked everything up and looked under everything and looked behind things and looked in things. He couldn't find Mjolnir anywhere. He even went outside, and being an enormously strong thunder god, he picked up the whole of his home and looked underneath, just in case he dropped it under the house. But it wasn't there. Now, if you're a Viking god and something has gone wrong, you're normally going to blame it on one person. And whenever anybody asks, and whose fault was it? The answer is nearly always Loki. If you don't know who Loki is, he is a friend of the gods. He's not like in the Marvel films where he's Odin's son as well. They've added that. He is the son of two giants, and he is the blood brother of Odin, but he is very mischievous. He is very sneaky. He can change his shape. He is a master of lies. And it's usually Loki's fault. And if it's not Loki's fault, Loki's usually the one who's smart enough and clever enough to think of a scheme to fix something. So when Thor couldn't find his hammer, he thought, I know who's done this. It's Loki. The next time we see Thor, he has poor Loki upside down by the ankle and is bouncing him on his head on the ground. Why have you stolen my crunch hammer? Loki's head is spinning. Little fat blue birds and little magical Mjolnir hammers flying around his head. Oh, I haven't taken it. I really haven't taken it, he said. I haven't. I promise, though, I really haven't. Said Thor. Well, if you haven't taken it, you should find it again. I will do anything to get this hammer back. Find it for me and let me know what I need to do. All right, said Loki. Just stop bouncing me on my head. So he put it in the right way up. Loki thought, if I'm going to do a search for this hammer, I might need some help. So he went to go and see the goddess Freya, and he borrowed from her cloak of falcon feathers, a beautiful cloak entirely covered with the feathers of falcons and birds of prey. And when he put this cloak on, spun it round and settled it on his shoulders, its magic came into being, and he himself became a bird. He became a falcon and flapped his arms, which were now wings, and leapt into the air and sped into the sky. Higher and higher and higher he went, circling round and round and round. He looked below him to try to see if he could see Mjolnir, the hammer, or anyone who might have taken it. He searched all of Asgard and saw neither the hammer nor anyone who had it. He flew over the rainbow bridge, Bifrost, and flew down into Midgard, where we all live, this bit, where the mortals live. And there he flew round and around and around, up high in the air. But still he couldn't see the hammer or anyone who'd taken it. So he flew to Jotunheim, the land of the giants, Jotunheim. And there, flying high, high above the ground, he flew over many giants' homes and castles, and giants striding through the woodlands, hunting or making war. And then he flew over one place where there was a particular giant, a lord of giants called Thrym. And Thrym was sitting down making beautiful golden dog collars for his pack of giant hunting hounds. Now, giants are stupid. Giants are really stupid. If you could think of the most stupid thing you can think of, and now stupid it 10 times more, you've got giants. You've got Viking giants. And Thrym was very stupid. But giants can also be magical. And if Loki was just dressed up as a bird, if he had a bird suit, with a carrot on his nose or something for a beak, he probably would have fooled the giant. But Thrym looked up and saw the bird flying high above him, and his magical senses said to him, "That's not a bird, I know who that is." And he called out in his big giant voice, "Oi, Loki! Hello, Loki!" "Oh, hello," said Loki, flying around. "You lost something, Loki?" No, I haven't lost anything," said Loki. He didn't want the giants to realize that Mjolnir had been stolen. If they realized, they might have formed an army and gone against Asgard. No. I'm just visiting. The lockdown's finished, so I'm out visiting, and I'm touring Jotunheim, and I'm just doing a bit of sightseeing from up here, as you do. "Are you sure you haven't lost something, Loki?" said Thrym, peering up at him and chuckling. Loki realized that Thrym must know something had gone on. He must have something to do with the disappearance of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. "What do you know, Thrym?" "Come down here and I'll tell you." So Loki flew down and circled round and came down. And as he came down, the cloak came off his shoulders, and once more he was in his true form. "What have you done with it, Thrym?" "Yeah, I've got Thor's hammer, and I've got Mjolnir, and I've hidden it. You'll never find it. I've hidden it 8 leagues underground." It's quite a long distance. "And somewhere I'm not going to tell you." "Well, what do you want for it then? What do you want me to bring you that I will pay you the ransom, and I will bring, so that I can have Mjolnir back? Name your price. How much gold do you want?" "I don't want gold," said Thrym. "I don't want gold. I want the hand of the beautiful goddess Freya in marriage. I want to marry Freya. Bring her here to be my wife, and you can have Mjolnir back as a wedding present, all right?" "Oh, my giddy aunt," said Loki. "You want to marry Freya?" Now, this had happened before when another person, a giant disguised as a human, had asked to, in return for their services, that he could marry Freya. And Freya was angry enough that time. What's she going to be like this time? "Are you sure there's nothing?" "No, I want Freya. It's all I want." "Yeah." "Very well, Thrym," said Loki. "I will go and ask." And he spun the cloak onto his shoulders once more and took to the skies as a falcon. Back in Asgard, back in Gladsheim, the hall where the gods met, in Odin's hall, a council of gods all got together, and Loki explained that Thor had lost his hammer, that he'd been asleep, probably after too much mead and ale the night before. Cheers. And that he'd lost the hammer. And that whilst it was his fault, Lord Thrym of the giants had that hammer, and in payment to return it, he wanted Freya's hand in marriage. He wanted to marry the goddess Freya. "What?" said Freya, who was understandably furious at being thought of being bought and sold like a cow. "What?" she said. And in her fury, she cried tears of anger. And when Freya cries tears, she cries tears of pure gold. "I won't do it, and you don't have to do it," said Odin. "This is ridiculous, Loki. There must be another way." Odin, chief of the gods, with his one eye, his wide-brimmed hat, sitting on his throne, with his ravens up either side of him, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory. "There must be another way to pay him." And so the discussion started. And Thor said, well, whatever it is, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll go there. If I only had the hammer. I'm making the sign like I've got a hammer, but I haven't. I keep forgetting I haven't got a hammer in my hand. Oh. The conversation went backwards and forwards, and nobody could think of a good idea. Until Heimdall, the watchman of the gods, said, I have an idea. Let us give Lord Thrym his bride. I will not marry that giant, said Freya. You don't have to, said Heimdall. What we will do is, because as we all know, giants are incredibly stupid, we'll dress Thor as you, as a bride, and in disguise we'll send him to Thrym's castle. And during the wedding ceremony, when Thrym gives him the hammer, he'll have the hammer back. What? Said Thor. What? Oh, I'm not doing that. It's disgraceful. It's dishonorable to dress as a woman. Oh, my honor. And he started getting more and more angry. And the more angry he got, his eyes glowed red, and thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning crackled around his enormous bushy red beard. But, said Freya, if you're happy enough for me to go and get married, to get your hammer back because you lost it, and you said you would do anything. Well, yes, but I meant very well, said Odin. It has been decided. We will disguise Thor, who is an enormous giant of a man, as the beautiful, slim Freya here. I'm sure Thrym won't notice the difference because he's a giant, because he's stupid. And we'll send Thor there. What? Said Thor. Oh, I suppose so. And I, said Loki, I'll go along to do the talking, because Thor is as strong as an ox and almost as clever as one. Loki did not trust him not to muck this up, and Loki whispered the magic and he spoke the runes, and suddenly he was there as a beautiful young woman dressed in the clothes of a bridesmaid. I will send a message to Lord Thrym, said the bridesmaid Loki, that we will be with him in 8 days for his wedding to Freya. And sure enough, in 8 days' time, the goddesses had decked Thor out in a wedding dress they got from somewhere. Maybe they would have probably borrowed it from a giantess, I should imagine. A huge wedding dress covered with brooches and jewelry in the same way that brides would be adorned for their weddings. Thor had Freya's necklace, the necklace of the Brisings, a beautiful necklace, the most valuable and beautiful piece of jewelry ever to have existed. They put that on Thor. I mean, they had to add quite a lot of chain to it to get it around his massive neck. And to complete the disguise, even though an enormously tall, hugely wide, burly man with huge, great hairy arms and a massive red bushy beard could be disguised, they put a veil over his head and beard. And voila, suddenly they were hoping that a giant would be fooled by this. The journey to Jotunheim was not that long. They went in Thor's chariot, which is pulled by 2 giant goats called Snarler and Grinder. Snarler and Grinder. They arrived in Jotunheim, and Loki, disguised completely as a bridesmaid, he looked like a woman, he had the form of a woman, and Thor with him, the enormous Freya bride, went and knocked on the door to Thrym's castle. The doors were immediately thrown open, and there was Lord Thrym, the giant lord, towering over them both. Hello, both of you. Oh, my beautiful blushing bride Freya is here. Hello, my darling. And took her hand and his hand. What? Lovely, beautiful girl, lovely girl. Come on in, he said. Come inside. Oh, and you too, bridesmaid. You're here to help the beautiful Freya, I expect. And then he looked at his bride and said, are you all right, my darling? You haven't said anything. Now, Loki had already said to Thor, don't speak. Don't speak. He'll hear your voice. You'll lose your temper. It'll all go wrong. I will do all the talking for you. But now that Thrym had wondered why Freya wasn't speaking, Loki, the bridesmaid, had to think quickly. And then she said, yes, Lord Thrym, over the past 8 days, Freya, as soon as she heard that she was going to marry you, was was so full of joy and excitement. She has been singing and laughing and crying out with happiness solidly for 8 days and has lost her voice and so cannot speak today.
Oh, I see, said Thrym. Perfectly understandable, perfectly plausible explanation. Come on in, love, come on in.
And in went Thor dressed as the bride and Loki disguised as a bridesmaid. Into his hall they went, huge long tables, groaning with the weight of the food and the drink. But this was a feast for giants, and giant guests and giant soldiers sat at every table, sitting there drinking from tankards the size of barrels, eating whole roast oxen, eating whole salmon. They were enormous. And Thor and Loki strode up between the tables, up to the high table at the top, where Lord Thrym, dressed in his best wedding rags, and Freya, his bride, would sit next to him. And Loki, the bridesmaid, insisted that it was their custom that she should sit on the other side. There they sat, overlooking the feast. And the feasting began.
Lovely.
They ate and they drank, and then Thrym noticed how much the beautiful Freya was eating and drinking. The beautiful Freya, with the veil on and everything, even though massive, had drunk a whole barrel of ale, 3 casks of delicious rose mead, chin-chin, had eaten a whole roast ox to herself, and 8 whole salmon. If you've never seen a whole salmon, it's this big. Oh, it's so big I can't even fit it on the screen. They're big. They're big. This is the size of a 10-year-old boy. You know who you are. Each fish, Freya had picked each one up by the tail, lifted the veil a little bit. Whoop, a fish had gone up, and a fish skeleton had come out.
She's eaten quite a lot,
said Lord Thrym to Loki, the bridesmaid.
I've never seen a giant, nor a god, nor human eat that much before.
Loki, the bridesmaid, thought quickly. Yes, Lord Thrym, he said. Well, since Freya heard that she was going to be married to you, she was so excited that she hasn't eaten these past 8 days. And I'm so glad she's got her appetite back.
Oh, said Thrym. Oh, I see. Perfectly understandable, perfectly plausible explanation. Cheers.
And the feasting continued. Now Thrym was knocking back the ale and the mead quite a lot that evening. Well, it was his wedding night. But he started to get a little bit tiddly from the ale. And while Loki wasn't looking, he kept trying to sneak in for a kiss with his new bride. Most of the time, Loki spotted, "Oh, Thrym, what lovely books you have here. Tell me about them."
"Oh, very interesting books."
But then, when Loki wasn't looking, Thrym turned round, whipped up the veil, and went in for a snog. He turned to Loki, the bridesmaid. Her eyes, he said, having somehow, probably because he's a giant, completely missed the enormous bushy red beard.
Her eyes, they're glowing like red coals of fire under there. What's the matter with them?
Loki, the bridesmaid, thought quickly. Well, Lord Thrym, when Freya found out that she was going to marry you, she was so excited that she has been crying tears of joy these past 8 days, and that is why her eyes are a little red today.
Oh, I see, said Thrym. Perfectly understandable, perfectly plausible explanation. More ale.
Perhaps, Lord Thrym, said Loki, the bridesmaid, perhaps if you were to bring the wedding present out and give it to your bride, and then the two of you could go off and lie down for your wedding night.
It's a great idea. It's a brilliant idea. Bring out the hammer. Bring the hammer here.
And so giant servants brought out Mjolnir. Now, in the Marvel films, they say that no one can lift Mjolnir unless they are true of heart. It's not strictly true from the original stories. Although it's a nice twist, it's good. It means that only Thor can use it. But it's a big magic hammer. And the giants dragged it out, its iron head showering sparks along the paving slabs through the room as it was dragged like the tail of a firebird. And there Thrym picked up the hammer and placed it onto the lap of his beautiful bride, Freya. Thor put his hand onto the haft of the hammer, and it felt strong, and it felt familiar, and he felt strong again. Yes, he had Mjolnir back. And he stood up from his chair, stood up to his full height, whipped off his veil, much to the surprise of all the surrounding giants who hadn't suspected that it wasn't the petite goddess Freya, but in fact was the enormous thunder god Thor under there instead. Whipped off his wedding gown, and underneath he had proper Thor clothes underneath, hefted the hammer into the air and turned to Thrym. You stole my hammer. You have dishonored me and you have disgraced me, and then you have given it back to me as a present. Well, on our wedding day, I give this present to you. And he whirled the hammer around his head once, twice, 3 times, and bang! Knocked Thrym's head from off its shoulders, and it bounced boom, 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 down between the tables. All the guests at the tables got to their feet, grabbing weapons, but Thor was in his element now, and he leapt from table to table, side to side, swinging his hammer. 1, 2, 1, 2, until the ground in that room, the floor, was red and slick with blood. And there was silence and not a single giant left. So then, Thor, now out of his his bridal togs, in his normal Thor togs, with his hammer, Mjolnir, and with Loki, who is quite happy to remain as a bridesmaid for a bit, went back to Thor's chariot and, pulled by the giant magical goats, returned to Asgard. And that is how Thor recovered his stolen hammer. And that is how Thor was able to go back and defend Asgard from attack by the giants in the future. Thank you.